Welcome back to the Kingdom of Pod. A huge win for Boise State, 49-10. And when I go through these things and look at this, and by the way, it's brought to you by Bet Online on the Believe in Boise State Football Podcast Network. When I look at what I say before the game, what I think before the game, and then I try to compare, what happened. And I don't know if it's just to be fair to myself or to point out if I'm right or wrong. And that's, it's really more about what I learn, because I go into a game and think, here's the opportunities or here's the possibilities. And then the reality sets in of what actually happened. And I thought that the Colorado State game provided an opportunity to really roll up some points on somebody. I didn't think Colorado State had the kind of team that could come in and do something differently than what happened, and they lost by 39 points, of course. Boise State plays best with the lead, and now you can add another 4 quarters to that. So, now they've got 14 quarters in a row and playing with the lead. At some point, that's going to come to an end. We'll learn something more about that Boise State team. I don't know if that'll be next week against BYU, but we'll wait to discuss that. One thing that, two interesting things. I want to talk about Koetter, his replacement, his impact, but I also want to discuss the nature of where this team's at right now with a 2-loss record. Going in 2014, that was Brian Harson's first year. It was a lot of expectations. Grant Hedrick was an experienced quarterback in the program, and they started with a thud and a loss to Ole Miss, and ultimately they were 3-2 after a horrific loss on the road to Air Force. I know this is 8 years ago, but to me there's some similarities. That team goes to Nevada to play a tough Nevada team, and basically Hedrick is told, if you don't turn this thing around, we're going to have to make a change. And Jeremy McNichols was a freshman at that time, and they burned his redshirt year, and they put him in that game as well. And so they were kind of all in on that, knowing that if they had a 3-loss record, you could forget anything. Well, they ended up beating Nevada, of course. They won 9 in a row. They won the Fiesta Bowl. They had Jay Ajayi. They had a lot of great things. But I'm looking at similarities and thinking this 2022 group could now, run off a bunch of victories as well. I just don't see the same path into a New Year's Day 6 Bowl quite as simple as it was, because the group of 5 in the first year of the college football playoff really was a mess. There wasn't as much strength as there is now. And you got Troy and Coastal Carolina and Tulane and Cincinnati and Central Florida and Boise State, of course, all in this 1 and 2 loss area. So I think it's going to be a much more difficult task. Boise State's getting no votes in the AP 25, and I think there's going to be a lot of 2-loss group of 5 teams, and Coastal Carolina and Tulane, could end up winning out and getting the bid because they're at a 1-loss right now, and that could make it pretty difficult. On top of that, there's really no marquee potential wins left on Boise State's schedule, and that includes BYU. That includes the Mountain West Championship game. So it's very unlikely at this point. And they've got a really bad loss to UTEP, who was an underwater team right now at 4-5, and not a bad loss to Oregon State as it relates to Oregon State's record. So that will come into comparison if we have a bunch of 2-loss group of 5 teams that the committee has to vote on and figure out. Now, we'll get a better indication of who they think the leader in the clubhouse is when they release the college football playoff rankings next week, and so we can start tracking that. But I do see some similarities between these two teams. I thought the potential was there for a score fest. Of course, that's what we got. But I really believed that this was also going to be a progression or regression of where Taylen Green was at throwing the football. As much as Dirk has run the football, as much as this team has had success on the ground, everybody's going to prepare for that, and you have to have some other trick in your bag, and there it was. And, the final statistics don't lie. Green threw the ball 24 of 30 times, 305 yards, a couple of touchdowns, no interceptions. Wow. What else could you say? I thought he made some throws, throwing them up there that could have ended up differently in interception, but that didn't happen. So there's really nothing there to pick at. I looked at all the touchdown drives in the first half, and there were key throws in every one of them by Taylon Green. So Dirk did go and trust his quarterback to be able to make those reads and and make the completions. And that's exactly what he did. I can't say enough about where Koetter has gotten this offense. I can sense something is going on in that manner because when I watch Avalos talk, and it's local media primarily. I don't know how many national media people are there. There's not as much discussion and talk about how much impact Dirk Koetter has. Because if you're Andy and you're out on the recruiting road, you don't want to build that up because if it's not there, you'll have people or maybe even Taylon Green saying, well, where are we going to go from here without him? So I think they're tempering that. I think he's very careful with that. That's my perception. He's trying to set the bar at a little different level because I'm sure behind the scenes, he's just praying like, oh my God, thank God. I don't even have to worry about the offense, let alone, tinker with it. I mean, it's just performing. So I was thinking about, Joe, Koetter's role is so critical, and it's so important to Taylon Green's development. Are you kidding me? I mean, remember when he first started playing against San Diego State, we're like, he's Kaepernick. He can't even throw the football. He just went 24 of 30 for 300 yards, right? So just think of the absurdity of that. How quick this has happened. He didn't play. Just Boise, if they'd have went into camp saying, you know what, Hank, we just can't get it done with you. We're not built to be a pocket passing team, blah, 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 blah. We got to go this direction because this kid's a run thread and all this other stuff. And they have installed that earlier. Would they be undefeated right now? That's a fair question. That's a really fair question. We're going to get, I think, a better answer to that question after they take on somebody who has much better personnel, who's not playing well in BYU coming up next week. But keeping Taylon Green happy is critical. I don't know enough about this kid's attitude and how he is. I mean, he doesn't talk much, right? That's not where they're going. But he's bought into doing what he's told. By all accounts, he's a great kid. I have met him. I have talked to him because he comes right from 10 miles from where I live here in Flower Mound, Texas. He's from Louisville, Texas. But that being said, the offensive coordinator position moving forward is very important, and it'll be interesting to see Dirk's role. Could it be, I was thinking that they could come up with a co-offensive coordinator role and get a younger OC that really just works underneath Koetter. Does the dirty work. Dirk watches him play call, sets it up, works with him. Dirk has no recruiting responsibilities. He's still in that consultant's role, but it's much more expanded. I don't even know how possible that is. I don't even know how much Koetter would do that. He's too smart to get into that kind of conversation. When he speaks to the media this week or during this season, he knows how disruptive that is. He knows how critical the recruiting piece is. He understands all of that. But as Taylon Green continues to get better and better and better, if that occurs, this offense, continues to churn out 500-yard games or 49-point efforts, and they win. It's going to be a bigger and bigger thing to deal with, especially in recruiting and for the future of this program. Offensive Boise State football has always been the identity. And there's a new word of mouth getting around, but it's closely followed by, but Koetter has said he's no longer going to do this in the future. So that has to get worked out. Defensively for Boise State, 170 yards to Colorado State, all the sacks, even by halftime. They gave up 30 some odd yards rushing. You can deduct all the sack yards from that, but still, that's just so dominant. With the, losing the Charles kid to the hip injury and no Matlock. And all those kids that came in and played hard, it is something else to watch right now. And they deserve so much credit for hanging in there. All the defensive staff, the Danielsons, and Avalos sticking his nose in there too. It was a complete win. A lot of interesting things happening. It'll be fun to break down the BYU game. I'll try to get to that as early as I can this week. So I'll talk to you next on the Kingdom of Pod, brought to you by Bet Online. here on the Boise State Believe Podcast Network.